turn that off. It's time for No Pad Sports Talk. Stay tuned as two brothers bring you the latest from your Michigan teams and beyond in hockey, baseball, football, and more. Let's get started. Here are your hosts, JD and Steve.
Welcome to a special edition of No Pad Sports Talk. I am one of your hosts, JD.
And I am Steve, and here we are again on back-to-back days. Today is Monday,
right.
And it's always good to, get out content as things happen. And that is why we are here today.
And biggest story in sports as far as potential, juicy stuff, bad stuff. Yeah.
Negative effects on the world.
Mentioned that. Yeah. Mentioned yesterday though about they're having Ohtani had a press conference. We won't know anything until after he speaks, and he spoke. So, look, I don't think anyone expected him to come out and say, "Yeah, I gambled. I got a gambling problem. I'm sorry." I think everyone expected him to come out, and whether it being true or not, I think everybody expect him to come out and just deny it. I think from everything I've read and I am seeing, I think most people believe that his interpreter is a fall guy. But he did speak. He denied any and all allegations regarding him betting on any sports. He says he's never done any betting. He's never sent any money willingly to the bookie. That his interpreter basically lied to him, stole from him, and once he found out, he took it to the proper authorities. So, one of the things that we talked about yesterday was what are some of the different stories that came out. One of the stories that came out um, before any of this happened, as far as like the press conference, all that stuff, was that as Ipe was giving his addressing the team in the locker room, he mentioned something about Ohtani paying off his gambling debts, and he was speaking in English. Ohtani didn't fully understand, but he knew enough that it was like, wait a minute, I'm not sure. What did he just say? Did he just say that I'm paying his, um, and that was something we talked about yesterday because that was something that came out, and sure enough,
Yeah.
that happened to be exactly what he said occurred. So,
Yeah.
ultimately, what are your thoughts on the whole thing?
Yeah. So after last night, I thought about it, right? And I sat and thought, like, I know everybody, well, I shouldn't say everybody. Almost everybody will sit there and say, yeah, I never think he would do something like that, right? So
Right?
that's what I'm saying. But if you think about what this young man has done, and I call him a young man because, well, he's younger than I am, but he has done nothing but live, eat, breathe, and eat baseball, right? I feel like this guy loves the game, right? You could see the joy on his face when he is playing the game, right?
Yeah. I think so.
And while it is his job, it is extremely enjoyable for him. And I just find it extremely hard to believe that he knowingly jeopardized that. That's just me, and that's I'm naive. Maybe people can say what they want, but
right.
I find it extremely hard to believe. As I was doing a little reading, Ohtani met his interpreter when they were in Japan when
Right.
he was playing for them. So they have a previous relationship from 2014 through 2017 before he came to the Angels, right? Which is why he was asked. So they developed this relationship. So you're talking about 10 years that they've, interacted with each other. And I
Yeah.
just, I think he got taken advantage of, and that's my opinion, whether it's good or bad.
That's, I don't think it's either good or bad. I mean, I think ultimately, I believe the guy because just like you said, and I'll just take it one step further. All this guy wants to do is win. That's the bottom
Hmm.
line.
That's
He
it.
was unhappy in the Angels, and everything coming out of there was he's unhappy because he doesn't think that the Angels can win. When he left the Angels and he was doing his free agent tours, one of the things he was adamant about is I want to go to a competitor.
Hmm.
And so every team he visited was a competitor. He settled on the Dodgers. He deferred 780 million
Six,
dollars of his or no six hundred
six
and
hundred,
eighty million
six hundred
dollars,
eighty million. Yep.
and only taken $21 million total over the course of 10 years, because they wanted to bring in other players, which that helped bring
Hmm.
in Tyler Glasgow and
Correct.
Yamamoto out of Japan, among others like Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, it goes on and on. Like the
Hmm.
deferring, and he did that because he wants to win. That's all he wants. So look, I know gambling is an addiction. And people can get sucked into it, just like drugs
Oh
and,
yeah,
and other things. It's an addiction,
absolutely.
and so an addiction can affect us all. No one's above it. And so, ultimately, I had to consider the fact that, he has a gambling problem. I mean, like it's not, even though it's out of character for him, no one's above it. So I thought as a possibility. Um, at any rate, everything he said kind of lines up to other stuff that I was reading. Um, I just think that um, that the way he put it in the timeline as far as things occurred matches up to how they occurred. Like, it makes sense now, right?
Hmm.
And unfortunately, there's still going to be people out there that's going to be doubting him. And to be honest, I do have a little bit of doubts too. I think I always will because, I mean, nothing can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt to me. And that's the only way to take those doubts away. But like 95, 98, 99%, whatever it is, I believe him. But I do understand those people having doubts because
Hmm.
it was suspicious. The story changing so much right from the very beginning, But anyways,
Well, how's this? You talk about how the story changed. I'm not necessarily saying that it changed. I just think that everyone has their own version of the story. So you could sit there and say this is what happened, and then I'm going to turn around and come over and say no, this is what happened, right? So you could
to a
say it
certain extent,
changed. You could say it changed, but I don't know that it's. I don't know that it changed. I just think it's
it changed.
okay.
It changed. Look, I'm sorry, brother, but like, I mean, it's one thing when someone witnesses a crime and someone says, "Hey, the guy was wearing a green shirt, but it was a black shirt," or the guy was 6 foot tall, but he's 5'6", right? Like, I mean, that's one thing. But having someone's story being, "Oh, Tani said that he was going to pay all my debts," to Ohtani saying, "No, you stole $4.5 million." Like, there's no
That's
like
that's two different people
versions.
saying it. That's two different versions. It's
But that's a
you
story.
saying that this is you saying I gave you the money, and then this is me like, no, you took my money.
But here's the difference because his interpreter went with a representative from Otani to talk to ESPN on an hour and a half interview, right? So the optics of it is saying with an Otani person with the interpreter, it's almost as if this is approved by Otani. Now, again, he did talk about that, saying that the interpreter went and told everybody that Otani was into this, blah blah blah, and they all believed him. But that's the optics of it, and you can't change that, right? Everybody thought that when this guy gave the interview over what happened, that it was he was one going to be telling the truth what with an Otani representative there present with the approval of Otani. That's how it looked. So when Otani then says no, he stole my money. That's why I'm saying the story changed. I get your point, and maybe it's just trying to potato things, but
Hmm?
it's just the optics for me. Is why I say the story
Oh,
changed.
and I get the optics, right? But I, I still look at it as a language barrier, right?
I don't.
Even if okay, all right, you don't have
I'm
to.
sorry.
You don't
I
have
know.
to. You can't tell me that just because it's a representative for Otani that the communication barrier wasn't there. If that guy
When
doesn't speak Japanese and he was talking to him specifically and it was being interpreted by his interpreter who's now in trouble, of course it's going to look like that, right?
and that's what Otani said, right? No, that's exactly what Otani said. Is that it sounds like and Otani didn't say this specifically, but it's kind of what we talked about yesterday. Whereas this guy was kind of more than just an interpreter for him. He was like one of his best friends
Yeah,
and maybe like an assistant, where he kind of handles a lot of stuff for Otani. So
right.
because it sounds like when this guy speaks and says, and more or less, I have the blessing of Otani. You have to listen to me. I speak for him. That they all just did what those interpreters said because they knew the relationship between the two of them. So I
Yep,
understand where you're coming from. I totally understand where you're coming from.
yep.
That um, this guy basically lied not just to Otani, but to Otani's people and said, Otani said we're going to say this, right? So totally, totally see where you're coming from. I really
Yeah.
do.
It's just a different perspective. I'm not trying to get you to agree with it, but I'm trying to see it from another perspective of like this, all this is coming through an interpreter who is under investigation for either stealing money or gambling on, right? You know what I'm saying? So
I do.
like if it didn't come straight out of Otani's mouth to a representative who spoke Japanese so that he understood where Otani was coming from, so when the interpreter was sitting there giving him a story and they didn't match, now we
Hmm.
know that there was conflicting, like you know. So
I do.
that's why it still comes down to Otani is saying this, his interpreter is saying this, and in the end, it's gonna have to come out who's the most right, because it's never gonna be perfect, like you talked about, right? Without a reasonable doubt,
It's
right?
I agree with everything you're saying, but that's why I said the optics of it. I'm not saying,
Yeah.
that it was factual as far as like that's exactly what happened. They had Otani's blessing. All that. I'm just saying from the optics of it, and that's what everybody's going to look at, right? Because
Well, I
everybody's
think
so used to being
intelligent people like me can see and look at it from another perspective.
there's definitely another perspective.
There is,
I'm just saying
there
that
is.
when you have people that's kind of used to just basically being lied to all the time and people changing their stories and all this
I
kind of
know.
stuff. And let's face it, Otani is a rich, wealthy celebrity,
Hmm.
and he's going to have people basically trying to help him stay out of trouble, no matter what that is. I mean, you even have
Yeah.
I can't remember if it was the NFL or NBA, maybe both, I forget. But when like the rookie symposium that they have,
Yes.
the ex players say, make sure you have a fall guy, right? Like someone that's always going to take the problems away from you so you don't get attached to these problems. Like they tell the guys to do that. So when you're hearing this, as we're not we're not involved in the elite group of athletes that went professional, right? But when us normal people are listening to all this and we see all the stuff they get away with, whether it's Ray Lewis doing that, allegedly what he did, or Jalen Carter, and list goes on and on and on, and you just see people
Deshaun
get away
Watson.
with these things time and time and time. Deshaun Watson, right? Michael Vick, although he did serve some
Yep.
time, but you get what I'm saying,
He
though, right?
did.
Like,
Yep.
I mean, you just get people that just continuously get away with stuff that we wouldn't normally be able to get away with,
Mm-hmm.
and
Because they're
and
athletes.
so because or famous. I mean, some certain celebrities
Yeah.
too. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
Whether they're actresses, directors, whatever. Like everybody seems to get away with stuff. And so when something happens and there's one story that's told, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, wait a minute. Nope, nope,
Yeah.
nope, nope. Wrong story. It's actually this story.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it just makes a normal person look at it and say, here we go again. Someone else that did something bad that's trying to avoid
Yeah.
punishment. And that's what I'm saying. I feel bad for Otani because I really do believe the guy. I
Yep.
honestly do. But this is not something he's ever going to be able to get rid of. And that's kind of, unfortunately, it's going to be something that's going to taint his legacy. So that's nothing that we can, prevent. It's nothing. It's just going to be what people think, again, based on their past history and seeing people do it. So,
Right. Well,
um,
this is why it's important to be the first one to tell your story. Right? Get your story out there
you're
first.
you're right, and then you kind of control the story. That's a whole Michael Scott thing. Michael Scott from The Office. I love that
Yeah.
Office show. If you
Well,
couldn't, if
but that's to me, because it's the first thing that we hear, and then everything else sounds defensive, right?
right,
So because of that,
yeah,
I
but
think that's where the issue becomes. But on top of that, I think the greater problem is just gambling in general, right? A sports
well,
gambling, right? Now, because we had
okay,
that Jamie. Think about the NFL and all the players that got dinged this year, specifically like
hmm
Jamo, right? And how we talked about that at
hmm
length,
hmm
right? And trying to when it comes to, I feel like they're trying to fly the plane while they're building it, right? Like they can't. I don't know if there's going to be a real good way to monitor and keep people from doing these things when they are. Now, California doesn't allow gambling like that, right? But that's beside the point. But in other places,
right,
like you can gamble, you can bet on these things. Now, baseball has a rule: you can't bet on baseball, right? Didn't say they couldn't bet on
right.
anything else.
But you can bet on
They can't,
everything else,
but you can bet on everything else, right?
and you
You can't
can.
bet on baseball. So
Yep, you can't bet
I'm
on
just,
baseball.
I don't know. While it's disheartening if he is truly involved in this, like deeply involved, and it was him gambling, right?
Yeah,
Because he probably
I,
could have
I, I really
avoided
don't
it
think
and
he
said, "Hey,
was. I,
I know." Well, I think if he truly was, I think he could have got out in front of it by saying, "I do bet. I paid this off. These are the things I bet on." Right? Like, and went to the team. The team could have made a statement. They could have gone. You know what I mean? I just, I just. That's where I
well, to a
feel like
certain extent,
I don't know.
I only say that because he could go to jail technically for gambling illegally in California, right? Like that would be possibility. Whether he would avoid it
Yep.
or not, again, because of celebrity status, I don't know, but that would be a possibility, especially for how much he supposedly gambled as far as the millions of dollars. But if
Okay.
you're Otani and you're not betting on baseball and you're just betting on normal sports, go to a normal sports book, go to online gambling. Everybody does it. You can still do it, and it's legal.
Correct.
The only reason this was found out in the first place was because the IRS and the feds were investigating this bookie, and they and
Yep.
they traced money wires back from Otani's account. That's it.
Correct.
I mean, nobody's saying that Otani can't gamble. No one's saying that whatever. Right? It's just because of this other guy under investigation for his illegal activities, they got
Mm-hmm.
Otani wrapped up into it.
Yes. So I I just I think this is gonna be prior to this, when all these sports books and all these things opened up and you could do this pretty much anywhere, right? Pete Rose was the big thing that happened, right? That was the last big betting thing.
Before that, the
Black
Black Sox
Sox,
before that, but that was back
right?
then. Yeah,
19 something, wasn't it? But
yeah.
I think we're going to see this more and more and more, until there's a way to figure out I don't know how to do it the right way. I guess I don't know. I don't know that there's a right way. you know, you know what I mean. It's one of these things that is so subjective, and it's going to come down to the person that's going to make the decision, right? Whether that's the commissioner of baseball, commissioner of the NFL, commissioner of NBA, right? Like, maybe the commissioners should get together, the three of them, or all the major league sport commissioners come together and talk about this, and then go from there, and then go to all these owners and say, hey, here's where we're at, and then go to the players associations. You know what I mean? To trying to work together to develop something that fits with the changing times, because you can do it. You can do it from your phone. It's all right here, right? And you're
Well,
right. The biggest thing about this one is not just that about the money and the bets. It's because it would have been an illegal bookie, and that's obviously, according to baseball rules, is also prohibited.
well, let's look at sports for a second, right? Like, it's like, hey, we're coming to you from the sports book so and so in Wrigley Field, and it's like, this is sponsored by FanDuel, and don't forget to sign up for your free account today and get $100 free, and we're gonna take it back to the studio over in blah 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 blah, and everything
Yeah.
is all up. Like, come on, at some point, right? Like when you got fields called after betting, and you got certain,
Yeah.
like, everything has a name now that's somehow associated with gambling of some sort, and like, uh yeah, like it's the problem's going to get bigger. I truly
Mm-hmm.
believe that. I mean, how many times do you see, whether it's YouTube videos or even on TV, like ESPN or whatever, where they're talking about like odds? Oh, like if you're betting, like, the Final Four, you look at this and bet on odds like this. Like,
Yeah.
it's big business now. Everybody's talking about
Mm-hmm.
it, and it's just going to get worse.
It absolutely is going to get worse. It's
And I think
absolutely going to get worse.
I think that the major league sports are pretty dumb if they just don't address it and make it a little bit more available, right? Like, just don't bet on your sport. Everything else should be legal. Like Jameson Williams betting on another sport, not even in not even in Ford Field or in the training facility. That's not at all at all. It was in a hotel when they were traveling, and somehow that hotel becomes the team facility. And it's
Yeah.
like that. Look, that's a stupid rule. I'm sorry, it's a stupid
Oh,
rule. Like,
we
I
we
I
we
know it's a
agree on
rule,
that.
and it's a stupid rule.
Yep. It it,
So,
it absolutely
they
was, because
have to allow
that's
something.
the thing I was telling you about, where it becomes ambiguous, right? Because a team facility could be the car that you're driving in, right? Like, it's the person who's going to make
The
that decision, and I just think that that's wrong to do it that way. Like, that's why I'm
It
saying,
is.
if these head people can get together and say, as a collaboration of major league sports, let's just talk with major league sports, right? This is how we'd like to run and talk about this, and then take that down to each level, right? So, to the owners, to the coaches, to the players
Hmm.
association. Like, you do that all the way down to the guy who paints the lines on the football field, right? It just, to me, that's the best. That's the only good way of implementing the change that needs to happen, to make sure more players don't get burned because they don't know. And and I know that's a separate issue from what we were talking about with Ohtani, but it involves the gambling problem and the gambling issue that's going to be more prevalent in Major League sports.
So I just want to read a little excerpt from Otani's press conference because um, I think this ultimately, like this is where I believe Otani, right? So he says, upon further questioning, it was revealed it was actually Epe that was in debt and told my representatives I was paying off that debt. All this has been a complete lie. Epe obviously lied about, basically didn't tell me about the media inquiry. So again, he didn't even know that Epe was giving a statement to the media, right? So Epe has been telling everybody around that he has been communicating with me and all of this account to my representatives, to the team, and that hasn't been true. So again, Otani didn't even learn about what was going on until like the season opener in Seoul, and when he addressed the team, and he says that he didn't fully understand what was being said because we talked about that earlier on, but he could tell something was amiss. And it wasn't until later on when Otani spoke one-on-one with him in the hotel that he actually learned of Mizuhara's gambling problem for the first time. Um, and that's when he found out that he had a massive debt, and it was revealed that an FA revealed to him that he was sending money using his account. At that moment, it was obviously an absurd thing that was happening, and I contacted my representatives at that point. He also says that he's fully cooperating with all investigations, and the IRS, MLB, and everybody else says that Otani is not subject to any sort of investigation. That it's really just looking at Mizuhara. Um, and the last thing he says is one of the last things he says when he's closing was he wants to make it clear that I have never bet on sports or willfully sent money to a bookmaker. To summarize how I'm feeling right now, I'm just beyond shocked. It's really hard to verbalize how I am feeling at this point, which I can understand. A friend of more than 10 years
That's
basically
right.
robs you of 4.5 million
Four and a half
dollars.
million.
It's more than just about the money. That's like that's one of the ultimate betrayals.
Yeah.
So I mean, Otani obviously trusted the guy if he gave him the account information. We talked about it before. He was probably some sort
Mm-hmm.
of helper to Otani, being like an
Yep.
assistant, getting things done for him. He had to have access to some of his accounts. And then he took
Correct.
advantage of it and took $4.5 million.
Yeah. So,
So
but yeah, that's I don't know that we learned anything new from his press conference other than
no,
him coming out and saying, giving his side and talking about what this guy's saying is not true, and that's, I think, was to be expected. If anybody expected anything more out of that press conference, then I think they were fooling themselves, right?
I
So
agree. I
it
agree.
it was, yeah, it wasn't about, it was just him coming forward with, apparently, obviously a new translator. Here's what I want to say. You could see the guy was trying to write that, as he was hearing it. Honestly, a little bit of props to interpreters, right? As fast as Ohtani, as fast as Ohtani was speaking, and then like he's listening, and it looked like he was trying to write, like looked like he was writing it down, like in English, like so he's hearing it in his ears and trying to write in English. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, holy crap, how do you do that? But I know, look, saw squirrel, so I get a little sidetracked. But
Yeah.
um, but
Well,
bottom
let
line
me.
is, that's just
Let
a
me
tough situation for Ohtani to be in. And while I will agree that it doesn't have a good look, it's it is going to affect his legacy. I don't know, this could be a blip on the radar. I mean, you talked about Ray Lewis. That's still there, right? But still gonna, still a Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let me run something by you. All right. I know it's going on 30 minutes here. I didn't expect to go this long, but I want to run something by you. And this is why I am skeptical slightly. Again, I believe Otani. I can't say that enough. I believe Otani. But here is why I'm skeptical. All right. Um, uh, and like we said before, right? There's always going to be those little doubts because I don't think it can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that he had no idea what was going on. But and here's why. So you have to ask a question. If somebody wanted to bet, why don't do it legally through the legal channels? Why go through an illegal bookmaker, right? Why? Why? You go through an illegal bookmaker, a bookie, because you might be doing something that you don't want others to find out about. Now, for the sake of argument, let's just say that's not normal betting because baseball players and other personnel can bet on other sports. So, for the sake of argument, let's just say it's baseball because that's one of the reasons why you'd want to do it a bookie as opposed to doing it legally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, let's just say that's true. So, then let's say that he got found out because of this investigation. Then let's say the whole Epe doing that hour and a half interview, saying, yeah, like Otani, paying off my debts. Let's go with that. Um, but see, that story doesn't really add up because the way that he was explaining it, it almost sounded like Otani didn't know about the gambling, found out he had a gambling problem, and then according to his story, Otani basically gave him $4.5 million to pay off his debts, right? But we know that's not true because there was multiple transactions between Otani's account and the bookie. So that initial account that he gave him is automatically false because it can be proven that way. It just doesn't add up. So if you're Otani at this point and say, again, just take it with a grain of salt, everything I said was true, right? You're like, oh my God, this doesn't add up. This is terrible. Or maybe one of your representatives said this doesn't make sense, or maybe a lawyer said this doesn't make sense. However it works, they're like, we got to do damage control, right? Um, so now the only way to fix it is you know what? Sorry, you got to bite the bullet on this one because now we just can't say I had to make multiple payments for you. You already said this, so now I have to go with you stealing it. But if you take the fall, we'll send you back to Japan and give you a nice little, um, stipend, right? Um, and so And the bookie also said that Otani was a client, even though the bookie said that he never spoke to him or communicated with him in any way, whether it's through email, text, phone call, whatever. Like he never communicated directly with Otani. It was always through his interpreter. So you can sit there
Mm-hmm.
and say Otani was an interpreter, make bets. So that way it can never be traced back to him. I'm just saying there is a logical path to say um, that Otani was still betting on baseball or betting in general with the bookie. Like it's logical. Again, I don't believe it to be true, but that can't be disproven at this point either. And that's why I have a hard time just saying 100% I'm all in with Otani. You know what I mean?
Okay. I do know what you mean. I do. Right? I just I just still think he was taken advantage of. And that's could just be
I do
my,
too.
it's trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? Or me trying to say that you're innocent until proven guilty. I don't know. I don't go straight to this is what you did, because someone else said it, I guess. I'm not saying that you do, because you haven't. You've been looking at it from both sides
Right.
or multiple sides, right? So that's not what I was saying either.
Yeah.
I
And I
I
and
have
I
I have
I did
chosen a
say that I
side.
believe Otani.
You have, and again, you have said that a lot, and I believe that that's what you believe. That I do. I mean, he. I won't sit here and say he's your favorite player of all time, but he is definitely ranks that he's that kind of player for you. He's that kind of player, I think, for the MLB in baseball, not just MLB, but baseball in general, no matter where you
Around the
play it.
world, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It-
it's
It's look, I don't know. I'm a skeptical person by nature. It's just how I am. I'm extremely
you are,
skeptical. I don't believe
you are.
anything that I read or see. I have to look into it. And, so if I can come to a logical conclusion one way or another that something makes sense and could, like I just kind of rolled, just laid out there, like that makes sense to me, how something like along that would work. It's hard for me just to sit there and say, yeah, 100% I'm in line with Otani. Although like 98% I am, and maybe at one point that'll grow to be 100%, or maybe it'll lessen depending how things go.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe this. I do believe that the truth will come out, if it indeed was him betting. Um, I think that uh, look, if it was another federal agency that was investigating, maybe, I could see like something being done. But the IRS, they don't care about anybody. Like they're good. If they're coming after you, they're coming after you. The IRS don't play, right? It's probably the scariest three-letter agency in America.
They just want their money.
Yeah. So it'll come out. It'll come out. And but I don't think nothing will. Cause I again, like you said, Otani was taken advantage of. He trusted a long time friend who was,
Mm-hmm.
like a best of friends. They hung out all the time. They were like brothers, you know.
Yeah.
It's like you betraying me. You know what I mean? Like that would just like I would never expect it. I wouldn't see it coming.
It'd be never, yeah. And it's one of those things you never recover from.
No, it'd be hard to trust someone again like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but anyway, any final words though? This ran a lot longer than expected.
No, but it was good conversation, right? Because it wasn't just like it focused on Ohtani, but I'd like to be able to say, because we ran into this during the NFL season. It's not a problem that's not going to go away unless the big people come together. And I think that has to happen in order for there to be some semblance of order.
I'd agree with that. Yeah. But
So,
my final thing is I just hope that ultimately this doesn't affect Otani and the Dodgers going into the season. I want to see Otani play postseason baseball. I
yes.
think he's been 2 of the last 3 years he's been an MVP, and the 1 year he wasn't the MVP, he was second place because Aaron Judge broke the all-time American League home run record. Like
Correct.
otherwise
Or
he would have
he'd
been a
be
three-time back-to-back-to-back MVP.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's crazy. And so I
Well,
think
that's why I
baseball
thought, what
fans
was it?
have been
Who was the guy who was almost hitting 400?
Luis Arias.
Yeah, Arias. I keep wanting to say Acuna, and I know it's not him. That's why I stopped and I asked. But yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, to me, he had that shot to take away, even the season that Ohtani was having, right? But it takes those one-off kind of things that are special to the baseball, like breaking the American League record in home runs, right?
Hmm.
Finish the season when you're over
Yeah.
400.
I mean,
So,
Otani isn't going to be the MVP this year just because it doesn't need a hitter. He's not going to
yeah.
be. That's fine. I mean, we'll get to see what he can do next year. But ultimately, I still want to see him play postseason, see how he does. Let's see, um, we've been robbed because he's been on the Angels since 2018. So we've been robbed of his um,
Mm-hmm.
being as great as what he's been playing for such a poor franchise.
Yeah.
So
I almost feel like the Angels are like the Cowboys of baseball. Cowboys bring all these people, you know, they got all this talent, and they can't go anywhere, right?
Yeah,
Because
to a certain
I felt like
extent.
the
Yeah,
Angels.
I mean,
I feel like the Angels had talent, right? Now, well, it was used correct, obviously, right? But the talent was there, and then, you know, right there, at the trade deadline, they started offloading people. Like, it was, and then you couldn't figure out whether they were going to buy or sell, and it, but they didn't have a plan. How's that? They did not have a plan.
no. I mean, when you have two generational talents on your team in Ohtani and Trout, and you
Yep.
can't even get into the playoffs, there's something seriously wrong with your team.
Yes.
But what do they have, like 5 MVPs between them, like, and you can't go nowhere. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's just crazy. Um,
So
but look, ultimately, I want to know what you guys are thinking, the listeners. Anybody that's listening to this, tell
mhm.
me what you think. I kind of expect it to be a 50-50 split in terms of those that believe Ohtani and those that don't believe Ohtani. Um,
Yep. They're going to be Team
that
Steve
wouldn't
or
surprise
Team
me, but
JD.
no, no, I'm Team Ohtani. Come on now. We're we're
We
we
are
are
on the
both Team
same team,
Ohtani,
everybody.
you know?
We are Team
We
Ohtani.
are.
We are.
I
And
I just
I wanted to
I
see the look on his face when I said that, though.
no. I had to bring
uh,
up an alternative that makes
I know
sense
you
as
did.
to why that not just me, but others would look at it and be like, yeah, there's something else going on here. That's all. So
Yeah.
I had to do that. So um, at any rate, let us know what you think. Tell us, gamble or not gamble. Let us know. I
Yep.
like to kind of get like a. Anyways, with that, all that being said, appreciate you listening. Don't forget to listen to some of our other stuff as well as subscribe so you don't miss us.
Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to No Pads Sports Talk. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. While you're at it, help spread the word by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media at No Pads Sports Talk.